All right, how's it going, folks? My name is Zachary Bakadal, National Master and Poder Academy chess instructor, coming at you with our fourth lesson of our series. So far we've worked our way through moving the pieces, getting some checkmates down, and knowing our basic opening rules. And we're here for lesson 4 today to work on building off of our opening rules. So we're going to stick with our opening here, which is the beginning of our chess game, and stick with some more strategies. Last time it was very important that we got those first 3 strategies down, which was attack the center with our pawns, move our knights and bishops out, and castle. And if you do those things, and hopefully you played a few games of chess in between then and now, and you practice those things, and you've gotten at least good at kind of finding the nuances and figuring out what you need to do there. Even if you haven't won, even just practicing and getting a feel for those are very good. And now we're going to show you some tricks that you can use when you do those. Whenever you move your queen out early or move your rooks out early or go against conventional chess wisdom, there really isn't much that you can be trained or that you can learn from to keep doing and getting better. But when you follow all the basic principles, there's lots of good tricks and traps, and that's what we're going to build on now. And so we're going to start with some traps. This is my favorite move, e4. I've played this my whole life, and it's a very popular opening. Almost all chess players will either play their king pawn forward or their queen pawn forward, which just means the pawn in front of that piece. So this is the queen pawn. And those are the 2 most popular openings in all of chess by far. Played probably 95% of Grandmaster games. So e4 is the move we're going to look at today. And we're going to look at 2 kinds of tactics, which are what I like to call the bread and butter tactics. Tactics that you're going to use every game, and you're going to look for every time you play chess. And so, bread and butter tactics are going to be our forks and our pins, and we're going to start with a pin today. And so, this pin that we're working on, and actually I'm going to start to show the example of the pin, I'm going to start with our D pawn opening. So both sides move their pawns into the center, and then we actually make this move here, and I'm doing this more as an example. This wouldn't be my normal second move for white. But it's an example of when the knight moves here, white has a possibility here to move his bishop all the way to this square and to make a pin. And so pin's the first one we'll go over. We've got pins and forks we're going over today. This pin, what this basically does is the knight is tied down by this bishop. Because if the knight were to move somewhere, let's say it goes back where it came from, it would be checking the king would be under attack. And remember in chess, whenever somebody makes an illegal move, you gotta tell them to move it back, and tell them they can't go there, they've gotta move another piece. So, here, black has some choices, and this is a good move that white makes. Whenever you can set up a pin, it's usually a good idea, but it's not undefendable. If we're smart and we're the black side, what we're gonna do is we're actually gonna put our bishop in between the pin, and now the pin's off, all bets are off. This knight can move anywhere it wants to, and it won't be a problem for black. Let's say white moves and black makes a move. Let's just say he moves his knight here this time. Now, if white chooses to take this bishop, he'll take a bishop, but he'll also get taken back, and so this will be an even trade. No skin off black's nose, everything's fine. And so that's what black should do. And it's good to set up pins though, because a lot of times our opponents, we'll go back to this position, will not block our pins. So we know if we were a black player, we would block this pin and we wouldn't have any problems. But let's say black hasn't seen a pin, and many people haven't, or they just disregard your pin. Not a good idea. Now we're going to move our knight out, and the strategy is when you get a piece that's pinned, it basically means he's frozen. He's not going to be able to move that piece, right? So what you do is you gang up on it. You keep attacking it with other pieces. And the way you kind of judge this is you say, okay, if this bishop takes this knight, that's one attacker. This bishop can take the knight. And black has one defender. So right now the pawn is defending the knight. If white takes the knight, he'll get 3 points. But black will just take back and it'll be an even trade 3 for 3. So white doesn't necessarily want an even trade here. He wants to get ahead. So what you do is you gang up on that piece. And what we're going to do is we're going to move this knight here now. Now we've got 2 attackers on this piece. This knight can hop over and take this knight, and the bishop can take here. So we've got 2 attackers, only 1 defender. Okay, so that's our plan. So here, let's just say black makes this move, we move here, black makes this move. This is the typical opponent that's making good moves for black, but he's maybe not paying attention to our strategy. And you can set up this attack every time. If you have a good opponent, he'll block it, but you'll still be in a good position. And every game, if he messes up, you'll be able to use this strategy to win some points. So we'll see now. What we're going to do is we're going to capture with our knight first. We're going to play knight takes knight. So he's going to take us back, And he's gonna be able to take, and now the point count right now is he got 3 points, we got 3 points, even trade. But because we had 2 attackers, we still have the bishop left, which is able to take the pawn with check. And so now the bishop is attacking the king, but the bonus here is not only is the bishop attacking the king, but the bishop is also attacking the rook in the corner. So when black moves this knight back to defend check, which usually blocking check's the best idea, if black decides to move his king up here to get out of check, he won't be able to castle later in the game. So he would rather leave the king here, block with the knight, and then be able to castle later. Now we have the option of taking this rook, which we're going to take, because we know we're going to get taken back by the queen. But if we remember our point count, rooks are worth 5, so we get 5 points there. Bishops are only worth 3, so when the queen takes our bishop back, it only gets 3. So we ended up winning an extra pawn, and what we call in chess the exchange, which is when you trade a minor piece, a knight or a bishop. We say minor pieces are knights or bishops, for a rook. So in the end, we ended up taking 6 points and only losing 3, and we won 3 points. And as you can see, that was not rocket science. A lot of chess isn't. It's very simple, logical moves. And we set up our pin, we attacked the piece that was pinned, and it ended up winning us 3 points. Now, remember, when you're doing these videos, try to set up a chessboard beside you. That's the most effective way. Maybe play through the moves by yourself. See if you can set up that exact pin we just did by remembering the moves. And maybe go over it 2 or 3 times. Because knowing something halfway in chess does really nothing for you. Knowing something really, really well in chess does all the world for you. You can do this trick again and again and again if you have it down by heart. But if you have 10 tricks down kind of halfway, you probably aren't going to be getting any force or pins on anyone. So very important to listen to this video a few times. My favorite chess instructor, I've said a few times, is Meles Sekashian. And he's a great positional player, and when I watch his videos, which I watch him all the time, I have to watch him 4, 5, 6 times. They're very complicated. He's talking about deep chess strategies, and if I'm even going to have like an inkling of what he's talking about, I have to keep watching and watching and watching so that I really have it down. And that's what I would recommend here. Don't just get through this, say you got it one time, call it good. That might be good enough that you'll recognize the pin. Go through it enough that you have this pin down pat and you can use it on somebody. That's the important part. So I'm not going to go over the pin. I'm going to trust that you've learned it well enough. And we're going to talk about another pin on the opposite side. So we basically are just flipping sides on the board, and I'm going to show you what else can happen with pins. So this time we move our bishop out to this square, and we've set up a pin here. I hope you remember the move that black should make here, and that sometimes he's able to make but doesn't. Black should move here, right? And that is going to block the pin and keep black safe. But again, black moves his bishop out. Now don't just think that these pins will only work on dumb people. Because there's lots of times where this bishop has already been gone, and then we set up our pin, or times where pins are set up all over the board. I'm just setting up an example here. Don't think that only dumb people fall for pins. Grandmasters lose by pins every day. So, now again, we know this piece is pinned. We want to attack it. We want to gang up on it. So this time we get into this position where black castles early, and we get right here. And now this time we're going to play knight takes knight again, just like last time. But when he plays pawn takes knight, we got to really go slow and see if we play bishop takes pawn here now. And I'll clear these pieces to make it a little easier. If we play bishop takes pawn, the queen is going to take us back. We only get 1 point for the pawn. He gets 3 points for our bishop. So we're going to avoid that move. And instead, what we're going to see here is that our advantage is not in winning material this time. Our advantage is actually in the fact that black has doubled his pawns, and that now there's an open road on his castled king. And so we're going to try to use that and checkmate our opponent. And so in chess, when you see a weakness, this time we see an open king, what we do now is we try to take advantage of it. And so many times I see players do a great job of weakening their opponent's side, but then they don't take advantage of it. You know, in the old saying in chess is a weakness is only a weakness if you can do something about it. And if you don't do something about your opponent's weaknesses, you know, they might as well not be weaknesses. So here what we're going to do is we're actually going to play bishop to this square. And I like to call this a greed test for black. Black can either save his rook and play rook over, but the smarter thing for black to do is see that his king is weak and move his king over, let us take his rook, he'll take back and he'll lose 2 points, but he'll live to fight another day. That's what I call a greed test in chess. A lot of people will save their rook and will now suffer the consequences of being greedy, because now what we're going to do is we're going to attack this king. Now, anytime we're attacking a king, we're going to get our queen out. And I know I said don't get your queen out early, but there's always exceptions to the rule. And a big exception to the rule of getting your queen out early is you can get your queen out early if your opponent's king is weak. And so this is the perfect scenario where our opponent's king is weak, and that's when we want to get our queen out. So we're going to play queen to this square, and this is check. So black has to do something about this check, and his only move is king over. And then I'm going to give you a second. This next move is actually going to be checkmate. And I want to see if you can solve it. So I'll wait for a few seconds, pause the tape if you want even more time, and see if you can find where white's going to go to set up a checkmate. And here's a little hint. It's one of those checkmates we worked on in our second lesson in the series. Okay, take a good look. Okay, so you've had the chance to either pause or check it out. The move is queen g7 checkmate. So the bishop guards the queen is the key. So the king cannot take the queen because of the bishop, and the queen surrounds the king, and he has no squares to go checkmate. And so you can see, the first time we used our pin to actually win some points. The second time we used our pin with the bishop to weaken our opponent's king, and then to end up actually checkmating him from a weak king. And so there are some good things in there that hopefully you understand, and you see how we can help weaken our opponent's king. So pins are just fantastic. And you can set those up so easily. Like you saw, I set up that pin on move 3 in both those examples. And pins will be ready to be set up all through the game. And now hopefully you saw how you can block pins so that if your opponent tries to do that trick on you, it will be no dice. So now the next trick we're going to go over, and I'll start with the queen pawn this time as well, is a fork. Now there's one real popular fork in chess that's a bread and butter fork you get all the time. And what it is what we're actually going to move and notice before I go forward, we're following our opening principles. We've got a pawn in the center, we're moving knights and bishops out, we're getting close to being able to castle, maybe we'll castle on this side this time. And that's very important. We're building off our foundation. These tricks I'm showing you only work if you remember your opening rules. So we've started by putting a bishop on this square. We've said this is a good square, it's a free-range bishop, he's happy. And this bishop is attacking this pawn. But however, this pawn has one attacker, it also has one defender. So if we take this pawn right now, the queen takes us back. So what we're trying to do is then we move this knight out. We're going to use this knight to be the second attacker. So when our opponent makes this move, we're actually going to move our knight up to this square. And our opponent is already in a heap of trouble because we have two threats here. So a lot of times our opponent will go here in this position, and then where we go is we move our knight up 2 and over 1, and we fork the king and the rook. And this is what we call a fork in chess, because now the king is under attack by the knight, and so is the rook. So we're attacking two pieces, we're forking them, and you see how the bishop defends. If the bishop wasn't here, black could just take the knight with his queen, and he'd just be up 3 points. But now if he does that, he will actually lose his queen worth 9, so he wants no part of that. So now the king's got to move, and we're able to take a whole 5-point piece over there, all off our nice little fork. So that worked out fantastic. And you saw, again, you'll probably be surprised, this trick will work on lots of good players, and it wasn't that difficult to set up. Now you also see in this position, sometimes your opponent will try to play rook over. And now we've got to make a slightly different move to get the same result as last time. I want to, again, if you want to, pause the tape, see if you can find the problem here, the solution that we should play. Okay, so the move this time is we're actually going to take with our bishop, and it's still going to be a fork. Because now the bishop attacks the rook and the queen, and the knight guards. And you've seen from these patterns, we're using one piece to guard, another piece to attack, but he's guarded by the other piece. And so you can see that same pattern come up when we do those checkmates, and also here when we're doing forks and pins. We're having pieces work together on the chessboard. So now we're forking two more important pieces. Black's probably going to move his queen, and then we will take his rook and be really happy. So we see how nice that little fork is. Like I said before with the pins, go over it a few times, make sure you have it down perfect, and we're going to show the same thing on the other side of the board. You can do it with the king or the queen pawn, where you move your knights and bishops out. This time the bishop is attacking this square, so we're paying attention to that. And when he moves, we're going to move this knight in over here and attack this pawn. And we're setting up a fork where there's not a lot he can do about it, and when he makes the move, we're going to play knight takes pawn and fork the rook and the queen. And he can't take our knight because the bishop guards, so he's going to move his queen most likely, and we're going to be able to take the rook. And this works great all the time. So look for that trap, not too hard to set up. It only takes a few moves, just like the pin, and it can really be what I call the bread and butter trick, where again and again, you're getting a great start to your game. And if you can start the game off strong, really get a good opening, get up a few points, you can build on that momentum in chess, and it really gives you a lot more options. If you start behind on your heels, you're going to lose a lot more chess games. So kind of remember those traps. See if you can get them. It's the pins and the forks we really want to get down. And the last thing I'm going to leave you with is you probably see how a lot of these patterns are the same or very similar to each other. And so the key in chess is to take a pattern and to use that same pattern in many different ways. That's going to be what helps you. So it's one pattern that you see in one position that's exactly the same in another position. And so instead of just memorization, just dull memorization, it's pattern recognition. You've seen that pattern before, you use it in 10 different ways. And that's what can really help you. Maybe you see this pin pattern in the endgame, or maybe you see a way to set up a knight fork later on in the game with 2 different pieces. So try to take those same patterns we're learning with forks and pins and apply them to all different positions. Okay, that's it for today. Thanks for listening to part 4 in our 12-part series. We're excited to keep going. By the time we're over with this series, the goal is going to be that you can really have some good chess strategies, and we've taken you from not knowing how to move the chess pieces to being comfortable with even playing in a chess tournament, to the point where you're not just playing in the tournament and getting beat, but you have some strategies, and hopefully you can win some games. And from there, you can just build on that. It's all about how much practice you work to practice and improve. So thanks again, guys, and have a great day.